Hello dear students, welcome to 2xion.com. In today's session, we're going to discuss about the topic control and coordination. So let's get into the topic. Our human body is very complex, performing various functions and processes to maintain a sustainable life. The body controls the movement and it coordinates its action to the other parts of the body. So when you talk about the control and coordination, nervous system and endocrine glands plays a very important role. The organisms, they always move in response to various kind of stimulus, like the heat, the light, the nutrition, and so on. All the activities are controlled and coordinated by the nervous system and the endocrine system. So what are hormones? Before that, the endocrine system secretes hormones. What are hormones? Hormones are the chemical messenger. It assists or it helps the nervous system to carry out various functions, and they are secreted by the endocrine glands. There are many endocrine glands in our body, like the pituitary gland, which is located in the base of the brain, the thyroid gland, exactly in the throat area. You have the adrenal gland, which is situated on the top of the kidneys, the thymus gland, and so on. Next, we shall see about what is stimulus is. So what is stimulus? A sudden change in the environment which evokes a reaction, which evokes a response, and that is called as stimulus. Now let me quote you with an example here. When you touch the hot object, what happens? You immediately withdraw your hand, right? So the heat is a stimulus here, and the withdrawal of your hand will be the response to the stimuli. The stimuli consist of the skin, the sensory nerves like the skin, the ears, the olfactory nerve, especially which gives the smell, the tongue, which has the taste buds. So let's get into each subdivision now. Now, the skin can feel the touch, supposing if it is a hot body or a cold, or if you have any pain, immediately you respond to it. So that is the stimulus. And when you talk about the light, you respond to the light and the color, any type of a vibrant color it may be. The smell, especially the chemicals and the beautiful aroma, the food of the aroma you smell, that is because of the olfactory receptors. And the next one will be the gustatory, which is in response to the taste, which is located in the tongue. Any type of a chemical, any type of a good meal, you relish it and you respond to it. So this is about the stimulus. Now, let's see what is coordination is. Now, all these organs in the body of an organism, they produce a response, or they give a response to a stimulus, and that is called as coordination. It will help to coordinate especially the nervous system and the endocrine glands, both together will associate and help to produce a response. What is coordination? Animals, they are very capable to sense and to respond. They are very capable to sense and to respond to the environment where they survive. The first point will be the temperature. The temperature. The temperature of the surroundings, especially they avoid the cold, they avoid the rain, they avoid the hot sun. So the animals, they respond to the temperature. They are able to identify their nutrition, especially their food. And last but not the least, they escape from the predators. The two systems which is involved in coordination are the nervous system. When you talk of the nervous system, they always helps to pass the signals. The signals are nothing but the impulses which is located in the nerve fiber. They pass the information, they pass the signal from the brain or by the spinal cord to the other parts of the body. The endocrine system. The endocrine system, they produce and they release the chemicals. The chemicals are the messengers of the body. Where do they send? They send it inside the bloodstream from the various glands. What are the various glands? Just now I told you it's the pituitary gland, then it's the adrenal gland, the thyroid, the pancreas, the thymus gland, the reproductive glands, and so on. Now let's get into the next subdivision, which is the neurons. So in this picture, you can see the neurons. The neurons have three main parts. They are the dendrites, the cell body, and the axon. You can see in the picture the dendrites, which is seen on the top, then the cell body, the middle part, and finally the axon, which is seen the purple color. So what are these dendrites are? What do they do? These dendrites are nothing but they receive the signals or the impulses from other neurons. The soma or the cell body or the cyton, the other way we can say, they help to process the signal or they help to process the impulses. Of course, the axon, what do? They transmit the signal either by a neuron to where? To the glands or to the muscles. The axon, they can be myelinated or non-myelinated. The impulses or the signal transmission is very fast in the neurons. They are very fast in the neurons. The next one will be the plant hormones. What are these plant hormones are? The control and the coordination in the plants, they are carried out by the plant hormones, and the plant hormones are otherwise called as the phytohormones. Phytohormones. The plant promoters or they are the growth promoters. The plant growth promoters can be divided into auxins, into gibberellins, into cytosine. Now let's see what of these auxins are. The auxins helps in the growth of a plant tissue. I repeat, the auxins helps in the growth of the plant tissue. The gibberellins, What do they do, or what is the function of the gibberellins? The gibberellins, they promote the flowering, the cell division, the mitosis, right? The meiosis, the mitosis process, the cell division, and the growth of a seed after the germination. So that is the main function of the gibberellins. I repeat, the main function of the gibberellins is to promote the flowering, the cell division, and also the seed growth immediately after the germination. The cytokinin. What is the cytokinin? Here, the cytokinin, it promotes the cell division and it delays, which means it prolongs, it delays the aging of the cells, the aging of the cells. It delays the aging of the cells. Now, the plant growth inhibitors. The first one will be the abscisic acid. What are these abscisic acids are? Now, these abscisic acids, they inhibit the growth and cause the wilting of the leaves. They also promote the dormancy of the buds and also the dormancy of the seeds. Next one will be the ethylene. Now, ethylene is a gaseous hormone. All of us know this. Now, this ethylene, it causes the ripening of the fruit, which means they will make the raw vegetative part of a plant into a edible part, a fruit part. So, this ethylene is used for the ripening of the fruits. The nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. Let's see what are the receptors are. The receptors are nothing but the sense organs which receive the response, that is, which receives the stimuli. And once they receive the stimuli, what happens? They pass the message. They pass the message to the brain or by the spinal cord throughout the sensory nerves, and that is called as a receptor. So what is the receptor? The sense organ which receives the stimuli. Once they receive the stimuli, they pass the message. They pass the signal or the message or the impulses to the brain or to the spinal cord. From there, it reaches the sensory nerves. Now let's see some of the receptors. The first one will be the photoreceptors. So as the name photoreceptors, the light, which means the eyes. The eyes are in response. The next one will be the phonoreceptors. The phono, as the word phono, we keep it and we talk. I'm just saying for you to understand. So where do we keep? We keep the phone exactly in the ears, right? So the ear nerves, the ear sensory nerves is called as the phonoreceptors. The olfactory receptor is nothing but the nose, which detects the smell, which detects the aroma of the food. The next receptor will be the gustatory. The gustatory receptors are present in the tongue, which helps to analyze the taste of the food, the chemicals in the food. And last but not the least will be the tango receptors. The tango receptors is nothing but in connection to the pressure and to the touch. So these are the receptors, and these receptors, they pass the information throughout the sensory nerves. Effectors. Let's discuss about what is effectors. An effector is nothing but it is also a part of a body. which responds to the stimulus according to the information and according to the instruction which is sent from the nervous system. So when you talk about the nervous system, it is the spinal cord and the brain. The best examples of the effectors will be the glands and the muscles. So when you talk about the gland plays a very important role here, especially in the human behavior. What is the main function of these glands? The glands helps to associate, or they help to assist in various processes like the digestion of the food, the excretion, especially the elimination of the waste products from the body, and to produce the anxiety, the happiness, the frustration, all the emotion, the emotional states, and to regulate the metabolism of our body. So that is the main function of a gland. So I repeat, the glands helps to assist in the process of digestion of food, in excretion, especially in eliminating the waste from the body, and also to express the state of emotion, especially the happiness, joy, sorrow, tear, fear, everything. And finally, it regulates the metabolism of our body. So when you talk of these glands, the glands can be divided under two heads. The first one will be the duct glands, which means it has the tubes. Duct glands are glands which has the tubes. Supposing, what are the duct glands? Now let's discuss about what are these duct glands are. What are these duct glands are? It's a gland that helps to secrete the tear, the sweat, the saliva, and the digestive juices. And finally, what happens? And they release them through the opening or the duct of our body surface. And that's called as a duct glands. So let me give you some examples of what these duct glands are. The exocrine gland, they are otherwise called as the exocrine glands, which secretes outside. Exo means outside the body, which means it secretes outside. It will not be secreted inside, but it will be secreted outside the body. So that is called as exocrine. Exo means outside. Endo means inside. So the endocrine glands we will discuss in the next slide now. But let me tell you the examples of what are these exocrine glands are. The first exocrine glands includes the sweat glands. So the sweat gland secretes what? The sweat. Where the sweat is produced? The sweat is produced in our body, but it exits outside. It never goes inside, but it comes outside, right? So it is a exocrine. The next example I can tell you will be the lacrimal glands. When you talk of the lacrimal glands, it is located in the eye region, especially in the eyelids, near the eyelids. Now, what does that produce? That produces the tear, and that is a speciality of the lacrimal glands. The salivary glands. What do the salivary glands produce? The saliva. So, do you have the saliva inside? No, you spit it outside, right? So, that secretion comes outside. So, hence it is called as a exocrine. And of course, the digestive glands. And finally, the stomach. The glands, the digestive glands, which is present in the stomach. So, all these are called as the exocrine glands. The next one will be the endocrine glands. What are the endocrine glands are? The endocrine gland is nothing but it is a ductless gland, which means it does not have the tubules, and it enters directly in the bloodstream otherwise. So an organ that makes the hormones, okay, and they are released directly into the bloodstream. So once the organs release the hormones, they direct it or they channelize directly into the bloodstream. And what happens? They travel to the tissues and finally to the organs all over the body, and that is called as the endocrine glands. What is the function of the endocrine glands? The endocrine glands, they help to control many body functions, including the growth, the development of the body, the metabolism of the body, and also the reproduction, especially the fertility. All these hormones will assist with the organ and also and travel to the tissue, finally to the organs of all over the body. So let me tell you some examples of what are these endocrine glands are. Some of the examples are the pituitary gland, you have the thyroid gland, you have the adrenal gland, and so on. Let's discuss about the sensory nerves. The sensory nerves are the nerves which carries the information or which carries the signal or the message from the receptors. So what our receptors are? The receptors are nothing but the sense organs from the receptors. So we studied various of receptors in the class, right? The phonoreceptors, the photoreceptors, then we studied about the olfactory receptor, the gustatory, and so on. So all these are nothing but the sense organ. And where do they channelize? They channelize to the brain and to the spinal cord. The next nerve will be the motor nerves. The motor nerves. These motor nerves, what do these motor nerves do? They carry the message from the brain and to the spinal cord, and finally to the effectors, and finally to the effectors. Here, the effectors are nothing but the muscles and the hormones, especially the endocrine glands, which secretes the hormone. So they are called as the effectors. The next, the next one will be the reflex action. What is a reflex action is? A reflex action is a sudden and an involuntary reaction of the body. The reflex action is nothing but a sudden and an involuntary reaction which is brought by the body in response to the stimulus. So let's see what is a reflex arc is. What is a reflex arc? The reflex arc is nothing but it is a pathway. It is a pathway which is followed by the electric impulses during an action, especially during a reflex action. So I told you what is a reflex action is. It is a sudden reaction which is brought out by the body when in response to the stimulus. Now these impulses or these signals, these electric impulses, what do? They travel from the effector, from the receptor organs. The receptor organs are nothing but the sensory organs. They travel from the sensory organs And after they travel from their sensory organs, where do they pass? They pass to the spinal cord. They pass to the spinal cord or to the brain. And what happens? Here it gets processed, and the information or the message is brought back to the concern or to the particular muscles, to the particular muscles. It can be any muscles, the cardiac muscles or the striated muscles, any type of a muscles, to carry out an action. So that is the purpose of a reflex arc is. So thus I can just tell you, I can just summarize and tell you that these receptor organs or the sensory organs, thus the receptor organs, then the neurons, the motor cells, the effector organs are all composed of this reflex arc. So let me tell you about what are these reflex action is. I'll summarize a little more in detail. So living organisms, all the living organisms, they need to adapt the change. Where? The change in the environment. Only if they adapt the change in the environment, they can survive, right? They can survive. So the nervous system, okay, the nervous system, what is the function of the nervous system? This nervous system helps to respond. It helps to respond quickly. It helps to respond very quickly to all these sudden changes, to all the sudden changes by a phenomenon, and that phenomenon, or by a process, and that phenomenon is called as a reflex action. And that process is called as a reflex action. I tell you again, the nervous system, it helps to respond quickly to these changes, especially which is brought by the environment. And of course, and this is called as this phenomenon is called as the reflex action. So the reflex action, when you talk about the reflex action, how this reflex action will be? It is an immediate involuntary, that is, even you cannot put a stop there. It is an involuntary response to a stimulus, especially to protect our body from any type of harm. It will protect our body from any type of a harm. There are about three neurons. There are about three neurons which involves in this reflex action. Let me name some. The first one will be the motor nerves. The motor nerves. The next one will be the sensory nerves. And finally, the next example will be the relay nerves. The next example will be the relay neurons. Now, I'll give you some examples of what is this reflex action is. So, let me give you some example of what is this reflex action. Okay, so pulling the hand, just you pulling your hand or leg away from when you are pricked by a pin. When somebody comes and pricks you with a pin, when they give one nice prick, what happens? You immediately tend to pull the hand. You immediately you pull your legs. When somebody kicks us, when somebody pierces you through the pin, especially in the leg region or the hand region, you respond to the stimuli, right? You respond. Your sensory nerves are very active and they respond, and immediately you get back. You get back. Blinking your eyes. You blink your eyes, right? When you blink your eyes, what happens? When an object such as any type of an insect, when an insect comes and falls on your eyelids, okay, of course, the eyelashes protect us. That's okay. But still, you respond to, immediately you are scared. You respond. So, your body will prevent from any type of harm. So, blinking of your eyes is also one of the reflex action. especially when objects, especially when insects, when they fly in front of your eyes, immediately we blink and we protect ourselves. So what is this reflex action is? And again, I'm telling you, it is also a mechanism, a neural mechanism that presents or that gives a pathway where it is traveled by a reflex action. But is traveled by a reflex action. So the receptors, what do these receptors do? These receptors, they detect the stimulus. They detect the stimulus. So in this case, I can tell you the pin, the pricking of the pin is one of the best example of a stimulus. The next one, the sensory neurons, what do? The sensory neurons, they send one message. The sensory neurons, they send a message. Once they send the message to the relay neurons, these relay neurons are located in the spinal cord. The relay neurons are located in the spinal cord. The motor nerves, when you talk about the motor nerves receives the signal. These motor nerves receives the signal from the brain and it directs it or it sends to the effector to produce what? To produce the response, the immediate response or the desired response. So this is about the complete action of a reflex arc. So the next topic will be the brain. So it's very interesting to know about our brain. The human brain, what does the human brain does? It controls every aspect of our human body. The human brain controls every aspect, a single aspect of our body, right from the physiological functions, up to the thinking capacity, the cognitions, the intelligence, everything it controls. It functions by receiving and by sending the signals. How do it functions? It functions by receiving and sending the signals where? To the neurons. And from the neurons to the different part of the body. Now, let's quickly get into the human brain. So when you talk of this human brain, the human brain of an adult, the weight of the human brain in an adult, it weighs between 1 kg to 1.5 kg. That is the average weight of an adult brain. And of course, it comprises of numerous of neurons. The brain comprises of numerous of neurons. The fundamental unit of the brain and the nervous system. The fundamental unit of the brain and the nervous system. So the brain along with the spinal cord, constitutes or it presents the central nervous system. And of course, this is responsible in thoughts, how you think, how you imagine, all that is thoughts. It is responsible for the thoughts. Then interpretations. You interpret, you give the reasons. And also, it controls the body movements. So these are the basic functions of the brain. Okay. So where is this brain located? Every one of us knows that the brain is enclosed within the skull region, within the skull. Now, this skull, which provides the frontal, the lateral and the dorsal protections. It gives protection to the frontal lobes, to the lateral, and of course the dorsal protection. When you talk of the skull consists more than 22 bones. 14 of them, that is the 14 of the bones comprises of the facial bones. All these are called as the facial bones, and remaining 8, they form the cranial bones. The CFS, or the central fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal fluid is a fluid that circulates within the skull and within the spinal cord. Now, this gives it prevents from shock and other frictions. Just like how the heart, we studied about the heart, right? The pericardial membrane consists of, it's surrounded by the pericardial fluid. And the last class we saw how the heart, it helps from friction and from shocks, from any type of emotion. So that peripheral fluid guards the heart, just the same way the skull, the cerebrospinal, okay, it will prevent the brain from any friction. How do they fill these CSF? They are filled up the hollow spaces on the surface of the moon. And every day, the cells produce around 500 ml, I think it is 500 ml of cerebrospinal fluid. What is the function? What is the main function of this cerebrospinal fluid, or the CSF? Now, this CFS is to act as a buffer for the brain. And it also forms as a cushion. Just now I just told you, it forms as a cushion, especially it helps from shocks and other disturbances. And not only that, it gives the protection to your brain. It forms a basic function, especially the protection to your brain. That is the most important function. And one more important is that it provides the buoyancy which is needed for the brain. That is, the brain is suspended into the layers of the cerebrospinal fluid, where the weight of the brain is really negative. And if the brain is not suspended in CFS, it would be impeded with the weight. So that is the main function of the CSF. Let's see the different parts of the brain. When you talk about the different parts of the brain, the parts of the brain can be divided under the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. What is the forebrain? The forebrain is the anterior part of the brain, and it includes, or it can be divided under 3 divisions. The first division will be the cerebrum. The second one will be the hypothalamus. And the thalamus. What is the function of the forebrain? Of course, the forebrain will control the reproductive functions. The main function of the forebrain is that it will control the reproductive functions. Not only the reproductive functions, the body temperature. It will maintain the hemostasis, that is called as a body temperature, and the emotions, the mood swings, the sleep patterns. It will alter the sleep patterns, the hunger. So all this is altered by the forebrain. And of course, as you can see in the image, the next one will be the midbrain. You can see the midbrain. What is this midbrain is? The midbrain is nothing but it is the very smallest and the central part of the brain. It is the smallest and the central part of the brain. And what is it comprises of, or what is this composed of? Of course, it is composed of the pons, the medulla oblongata, the cerebrum. So the next one will be the hindbrain, and the hindbrain is nothing but the lowest part of the brain. It is the lowest part of the brain. That will be the hindbrain. The cerebellum, the hindbrain comprises of the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, and finally the pons. Now let's quickly get into the topic. What is this forebrain is? What is the function of the forebrain? So when you talk of the forebrain, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. You can see in the figure there. The cerebrum will be the largest part of the brain of the cortex. And of course, it consists of many hemispheres. And that hemisphere is called as the cerebral hemisphere. And that hemisphere is called as the cerebral hemispheres. And of course, it is composed of the cerebral hemispheres that join together in thick bands of fiber. These cerebral fibers, they join as a thick fiber, and that thick fiber is nothing but, it is called as a corpus callosum. It is called as a corpus callosum. And of course, when you talk the divisions of the cerebrum, the divisions of the cerebrum can be divided under 4 heads. Now that let me quickly tell you what are the divisions of the cerebrum. Okay, the first one will be the frontal lobe. The first one will be the frontal lobe. You can just see in the figure there, the frontal lobe. The next one will be the parietal lobe. The next one will be the parietal lobe. The third lobe will be the occipital lobe. It will be the occipital lobe. And the fourth one will be the temporal lobe. Now let me tell you what is this frontal lobe is. The frontal lobe, it is associated with the speech, how you speak, right? It is associated with reasoning, in planning out things, that is, in planning out any type of execution for that matter. So it helps in planning, in reasoning, and also the cerebrum, especially the frontal lobe, helps to reason out. So it helps in problem solving abilities, the problem solving, and finally the movements. Now all these is associated with the frontal lobe. Now let's see what is a parietal lobe is. The parietal lobe will always help in movements, especially in analyzing the stimulus, in analyzing the stimulus. Next one will be the occipital lobes, as you can see in the figure, the occipital lobes. Now what is this occipital lobe is? This occipital lobe is related in relation to the eye or the vision, the visuals, the visual processing unit it is. And of course, the last one will be the temporal lobe, which you can see, you can see above the midbrain there in the figure. What it has to do? The region, this region, especially the temporal region, the temporal region is related to the recognition. You recognize, right? Maybe you would have seen that person 10 years before and 15 years before. And after 15 or 16 years, you'll be able to recognize that person immediately, right? Oh, this is the person. I know she is my friend, or he is my friend. How do you recognize? That recognition is brought forth by the temporal lobes. The temporal lobes gives the recognition, and also in giving memory. all the nostalgic days, especially when you go back to your childhood days, all the memories still are fresh in your mind. And that is because of the temporal lobe. It gives the memory recognition and the auditory stimulus. You can hear the auditory stimulus and of course the speech. So all this is controlled by the forebrain. Of course, the next one will be the brain. When you talk about the brain consists of two tissues. The two tissues. The first tissue will be the gray matter. It will be the gray matter, and the second one will be the white matter. Now, what is this gray matter is? The gray matter consists of various types of cells. It consists of various types of cells. Now, this makes up the bulk of the brain or the weight of the brain. The next part will be the white matter. So what is this white matter is? The white matter is nothing about, it is composed of the axons. It composed about the axons. And what do? They connect the gray matter areas of the brain with each other. So that is a function of the white matter. So this is the function, the entire function of only the forebrain. So maybe in the next class, I will explain what is the midbrain is, what is the hindbrain, and what are the facts of our brain. So in today's session, we saw what is the stimulus is, what is the coordination, what are the effectors, what are the receptors. We also saw about the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, how the peripheral nervous system is divided into. It is divided into the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and how the coordination is done. And we also saw about the brain. We saw about the different parts of the brain and the functions. In the brain, we saw about what is the forebrain is and what are the forebrain parts are, what the divisions and what are the layers. So hope this session was very interesting and hope you all enjoyed this session. Please stay tuned with us. Please subscribe our channel to Exion.com for more updates and for information. So if you like this video, please share the video, subscribe to our channel to Exion.com, and of course don't forget to hit the thumbs up button there. So meet you all in the next part of the brain. Until then, you all take care. See you children. Take care.